I was surprised to hear the loud screeching of tires on the road. As I stood outside my home, everything changed in an instant. Before I became aware of it, I was lying on the ground, my body aching from the groceries scattered around me. I had been hit by a car, and as I tried to understand what just happened, as I looked up, I realized who was driving the car. It was my mother-in-law, Janet. Later, while at the hospital, I sat in bed feeling sore and bruised. I heard the phone ring, and it was my husband. Adam. His voice was filled with tension and anxiety. "Kelly, you must inform the police you just fell," he said quickly. "They're saying someone saw Mom hit you with the car. Are you able to believe that?" He said something that shocked me. Adam was trying to disguise the fact that Janet had run me over, and his parents were listening to his justifications. My mind wandered back to our early marriage. When we initially met, Adam was assigned to be my mentor, and I remembered that we had shared an office. Despite his lack of charm, Adam was trustworthy and caring, and I soon warmed up to him. Our partnership seemed like a dream come true at first. After we were married, leaving my job to live with his parents was something I soon regretted. Living with Janet and her husband, Tyler, was never simple. Janet had a sharp tongue and enjoyed reminding me of my wifely duties. "You should be grateful to Adam. He's the reason you have a comfortable life," she would say, in a tone more offensive than kind. Tyler was more taciturn than Janet, but his outdated ideas about women often made me feel less than her. My relationship with Adam soured as his support for his parents grew. "They're old," he would curtly reply, "and you need to be more understanding." As time went on, whenever I attempted to express my feelings to him. As our prospects of starting a family started to fade, our marriage became even more strained. Despite Janet and Tyler's constant persistence, Adam didn't seem interested in having grandchildren. While he was lost in his own world, I had to endure his parents' constant remarks. The only people who could offer me comfort during these trying times were my neighbor Diane and her husband Jeremy. Diane understood my struggles because she had them too. She saw the truth behind the romanticized image of my marriage that lay in the hospital bed and became a friend and support system for me. I thought about all of this as Adam's voice pulled me back to the present. "Kelly, you have to do this for yourself and the family." I had changed on the inside, yet he pleaded with me to tell a lie about what had happened. As a wife, I couldn't always comply with their demands. I realized I couldn't deny the fact that they had gone too far. This time, I hung off the phone feeling more determined than ever. They had to cope with the consequences of their actions. I was ready for self-defense. I was no longer the only one involved. It was about facing the injustice that had long controlled my life. As I lay in the quiet hospital room, my mind was racing. Along with my injuries, I was also wounded by the treachery of those I had previously considered family. The sunlight coming in through the window cast long shadows on the floor. Dion came in. She had a troubled appearance. She sat next to me and asked Kelly gently, "How are you feeling?" I tried to grin as I said, "I've been better." Then I asked her a question. "And what did the police say?" Diane's face grew serious. "At first, they believed the explanation that it was just an accidental fall," she stated. "But I told them what I had seen. Janet drove out of the garage like a mad person, and I discovered you on the ground." Hearing this, I clenched my fist. Anger was seething within me. To protect his family, Adam begged me to tell lies. Diane took hold of my hand and held on tight. "This extends beyond the accident, Kelly. You can't let them get away with this. Years of control and manipulation are to blame. This is your chance to finally escape." Her words struck a chord. For years I had put up with Janet's caustic comments and Tyler's disdainful manner. Adam was obedient. He had never stood up for me and had always let his parents say and do what they pleased. I realized that I had been stuck in a terrible cycle of control and humiliation, even though I had tried my hardest to be strong. As Diane and I continued our conversation, a strategy began to take shape in my mind, a strategy to ultimately defend myself and secure justice. I concluded that Janet and her family had to deal with the consequences of their actions. The next day, a police officer came to take my statement. I told him about the accident, the pain, the betrayal, and Adam's cries for me to keep it a secret. The officer listened carefully as he took notes. When I finished, he looked at me gravely and said, "We have enough, so we might bring them in to be interrogated. We'll investigate more, but your statement is important." This gave me a sense of strength. The legal system was not the only entity participating in this. It felt like the first step toward taking back my life. Over the next few days, I grew increasingly determined. During her repeated visits, Diane kept me updated on the investigation. She told me that people in the community were banding together to express their disapproval of Janet's behavior and to support me. Jeremy, her husband, was studying the tape from their security cameras, hoping it would show something helpful. I thought there was a chance we might have proof. If we could prove Janet hit me on purpose, it would prove what they did daily. I became stronger physically, but my need for justice was what kept me going. Finally, I had discovered my path to liberty. I was no longer silent, a woman in agony who kept silent in the shadows. I was ready to stand up, fight back, and reveal the truth about the individuals who had wronged me for so long now that I was a woman. The small room of the police station seemed colder than ever. I had trembling palms while waiting for the dentist, not from fear, but from anger and excitement. Finally, Dennis Richichi walked seriously into his face as the door opened. "We went over the footage from your neighbor's security camera." He placed a file on the table in front of me and continued, "You can see Janet's automobile colliding with you. It's clear." Although I felt relieved, I also felt a tremendous need for justice. "What comes next?" I asked for a voice analysis. "They will be held responsible for their acts, and your spouse will also be called in for questioning today." Dennis Richichi responded. As I walked out of the police station, I had a plan. It was not enough to just expose what they had done. They needed to understand the full ramifications of their actions. Later that day, Diane gave an update over the phone. Recently, the police took Adam and Janet Tyler into custody to question them. She told me that people in the area were talking about it. They are surprised at Jat's actions. As soon as the news spread, people were astonished and upset at a family they had once held in high regard. I felt as though the years of unsaid suffering were finally being recognized. That night, I lay in my hospital bed. I imagined Janet's face when she was finally forced to face her behavior. The woman who had been forceful and intimidating was now cornered as a result of her actions. I'd seen this scene several times, and each time it seemed like a small victory. But it wasn't just Janet that had lied to me. The anguish of Adam's betrayal was far worse. He had chosen to support his parents over me because he was honest and moral. A few days later, he needed to understand how much his choice had affected me. I was discharged from the hospital. I was still in pain, but my soul remained strong. Diane and Jeremy were waiting for me with determined, anxious looks on their faces. "Kelly, you have our support." "Firmly," said Jeremy. "Anything you need." "Thank you." With a deep sense of support that I hadn't felt in a long time, I replied. That evening, while I sat in Diana's living room, we turned on the news. My accident and the investigation had been reported by the local media. The screen displayed images of Adam and Janet Tyler. Their faces were suddenly in the spotlight, and their reputations were ruined. It was strange to see them in that condition. Those who had previously dominated and disparaged me were now held responsible for their conduct for the first time. I felt strong and self-sufficient for a long time. I knew this was just the beginning, but I was ready for whatever came next. Now is the moment for me to reclaim my life. I didn't feel sorry for them, but my personal anguish had suddenly become a public spectacle. They had caused their death, and this was the beginning of it. Adam and Janet Tyler were seated across from me, and I could feel the tension in the interrogation room. Their expressions were a mix of dread, anger, and incredulity. Dennis Richichi was sitting next to me, reminding me all the time that justice was being done. "You all understand why you are here." Dennis Reed glared at them as he spoke. The evidence is clear. Janet, you hit Kelly with your car and drove off without stopping. Tyler, you saw what happened but chose to say nothing. And Adam, you tried to conceal everything. Though Janet's expression remained strong, I could detect a flicker of fear in her eyes. She spoke with a slight tremor in her voice. There was an accident. I had no intention of hitting her. Tyler said nothing. Adam looked guilty and ashamed, his eyes glued to the table, his cheeks crimson. Finally, he spoke louder. Shaky Mom, why didn't you just stop? Why did you run? It seemed that he was only now seeing the seriousness of this whole situation. My heart was hardened from all the abuse over the years, so I didn't feel sorry for them. You had the potential to kill me. Janet, you were just concerned about saving yourself. I was combative in my speech. Janet's strong veneer crumbled and tears began to fall down her cheeks. I was terrified. I was scared when she started crying. Finally, Tyler's words could hardly be heard above a whisper. We were wrong. We should never have lied, he admitted. Dennis Ritchie then turned to face Adam and you. Adam, you ask your wife to try to modify the facts and tell a falsehood on your behalf. What would you say about that? Adam looked down and his words, I don't know, came out faintly. I wanted to protect my parents. I felt sad for Adam and disgusted at the same time. He had chosen his parents over the truth in me, his wife. You didn't just betray me. Adam. I talked in a calm yet forceful voice. You betrayed all we ever owned. Dennis Ritchie nodded gravely. All of you will be held accountable for your actions. This is a serious problem. While we were leaving the room, I felt like I was finished. Finally, who they were had been exposed. Janet's tears revealed her to be a coward. Tyler was as accountable for observing and permitting it all to happen, even though he remained silent. And Adam, a man who had lost his moral sense due to his unwavering devotion to his parents. I became aware of a shift in the surroundings as I was leaving the police station. For the first time in years, I felt liberated. I had faced them and told them the truth, so now I could start to continue. I was ready to start a new chapter in my life, since I had finally shed the weight I had been carrying for so long. Now that I had faced my past, it was time to start building my future. The air felt cleaner, the sky seemed whiter, and I was free of the heavy grip of Janet and Adam. Diane and Jeremy were waiting for me outside, looking both pleased and anxious. You're amazing in there. Warmly, said Diane. Thank you, I replied, deeply grateful for their steadfast assistance. In the weeks that followed, the lawsuit against Janet, Tyler, and Adam began. Their charges spread throughout our community, generating contradictory responses. Some expressed disbelief, while others expressed disappointment. But this showed me that my struggles had finally been acknowledged and understood. Within this time frame, I stayed with Diane and Jeremy. They not only gave me a place to stay, but also a warm, kind environment in which I could begin the recovery process. Their kindness was a far cry from the years of cold treatment I had endured from Adam and his family. One evening, we sat in Diana's living room. Jeremy provided some information. The prosecutor's office has filed serious charges against Tyler and Janet. Adam, too, for trying to keep everything a secret. I nodded, feeling both pleased and sorry. They were finally being held accountable for their actions. What about you, Kelly? Diane asked delicately. Well, what will you do now? I took a big breath, feeling clearer than I had been in a long time. I intend to submit a divorce petition. I can't stay with someone who prioritized his parents over me, especially in a situation like this. Diane stretched over and gripped my hand, a gesture that was unsaid but deeply felt. The divorce moved quickly because of Adam's guilt and the overwhelming evidence against him. I received a fair payment in return for the years of emotional pain I had endured. After this settlement, I decided to start afresh. I was renting a small flat. Easy, but all mine. It was my space, where I could rebuild my life as I saw fit. Diane and Jeremy were at my side as I began my new chapter. Jeremy, who owned a small business, offered me a position. "You have outstanding skills and expertise. Kelly, we'd be lucky to have you," he said genuinely, and I concurred. After being shut out of a world for so long, I can't wait to reclaim my liberty. When I first started this job, I felt as though I was rediscovering who I was. I uncovered sides of myself that years of dissatisfaction had repressed. I was not merely Adam's wife. I was Kelly, a confident, strong woman. As the weeks passed, I adjusted myself to my new life. I was at peace and had a purpose for the first time in years. Working with Diane and Jeremy helped me realize my worth and potential. The day of the ultimate verdict in the Janet and Tyler case eventually arrived after several months. I had the impression that this moment, as I sat in the courtroom, would finish that painful chapter and allow me to embrace my new beginning. I felt closure on the other side of the room. Janet, Tyler, and Adam sat with worried and sad expressions. The judge's voice echoed through the quiet chamber, given the evidence. "This court finds Tyler Gill and Janet Gill guilty of hit and run and obstruction of justice. Adam Gill was found guilty of aiding in the cover-up." As the judge read out their sentence, there was a soft murmur in the chamber. Janet and Tyler received prison sentences, while Adam received community service and probation. Their faces clouded as they realized the severity of their fate. After the decision, as soon as I left the courthouse, I could feel the warmth of the sun. Diane and Jeremy joined me, and their presence reminded me of the network of support that helped me get through this trying time. "Justice has been served." "Yes," Diane said in a relieved tone, "but at a price," I replied, thinking back on the years of pain and loss I had endured to reach this point. News of a sentencing quickly spread. Janet, formerly a community favorite, was now a convicted felon. My ex-husband Adam was seen as having betrayed his wife to protect his corrupt parents, and Tyler, her covert accomplice, was also held accountable. In the weeks that follow, I could feel a change in myself. Gradually, the weight of my past started to give way to a growing sense of strength and autonomy. My life had been ruled by Janet and Adam, but now I was in control. When I began working for Jeremy's organization, I had a fresh start full of challenges and joys. In this supportive environment, I thrived and saw my confidence grow every day. Diane, who is always by my side, encouraged me to embrace this new chapter fully. But what surprised me the most was something I didn't expect. At a business event, I met William, Jeremy's pal. He was polite and amiable, and he saw me for who I truly was, not just for my background. Over time, of course, our relationship grew into something more. Within a year, we were married in a small, private ceremony. It was a celebration of recovery and new beginnings. William knew everything about my past, including the betrayal and suffering I had endured. It didn't hurt our friendship, on the contrary. It made it stronger as I stood beside William looking. When I peered into his soft eyes, I felt as if I had at last discovered my purpose. My life has changed in unexpected ways. I was no longer the woman who had suffered in silence. I had overcome my challenges, found true love, and was leading a peaceful, respectful, and trustworthy life. There were friends like Diane and Jeremy standing alongside William and me. I was grateful for the experience. Because I had turned my sorrow into strength, I now had a promising future. I realized that mutual respect, understanding, and support were the cornerstones of a genuine connection. It was everything my marriage to Adam had been lacking. A year had passed since the trial finished, and life had settled back into its peaceful normal. William and I had discovered a cozy home that was reminiscent of our own. The awful recollections of my time with Janet, Tyler, and Adam were slowly being replaced by the love and happiness that now dominated my life. One evening, William and I watched from the porch. He turned to me and gave me a big smile as the sun went down. "As you are well aware, Kelly, I admire your strength. You are now stronger and happier, even though what you went through was challenging." I leaned into him and relaxed in his arms. I wouldn't have been able to succeed without Diane, Jeremy, and most importantly, you. I replied. My heart is full of gratitude. We discussed plans and unconsidered dreams. The pain and turmoil of the past no longer held me back. They had become stepping stones that led me to this peaceful place. Sometimes, I would receive updates about Janet, Tyler, and Adam. As they served their sentences, Janet and Tyler had to face the consequences of their actions every day. But it was difficult to start over. He felt isolated and guilty since the community was aware of his betrayal. Even though I had moved on, there was a part of me that felt somewhat content. Knowing that they had harmed me, they had to deal with the karma of their deeds and deal with the fallout from their choices. While I reflected on my journey, I became aware of how much I had changed. I was no longer a woman who was deceived and hurt by others. Instead, I was a woman who stood up for herself, fought for justice, and took back her life. Now, surrounded with love and support, I felt ready for anything that might come up. My past hardships and heartbreaks had shaped me, but they did not define who I was. I valued my present and future over my history, which would always be part of me. I was Kelly, a survivor, a lady who had overcome all obstacles to find happiness. It was a story. I was pleased to write a story about love, overcoming adversity, and finding joy. I was not merely a victim of unfair treatment. I was a woman with hope for the future who had reclaimed her life and who had welcomed love. Having William by my side and those who truly cared about me, I knew what was going to happen next. I would face it with joy and bravery. I was ready to seize the opportunity presented by this new phase of my life.